Adam, you're up.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Levine, and I'm Executive Director here at the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, or NYMTC. As the Downstate Region's Metropolitan Planning Organization, NYMTC provides a collaborative planning forum to address transportation-related issues and develop regional plans through our members' shared vision for the transportation network that connects New York City, Long Island, and the Lower Hudson Valley. Thank you all for participating in today's brown bag presentation. Please note that this webinar is eligible for one certification maintenance credit from the American Planning Association. You can find more information about this in the chat. Before we get into this too much further, I want to ask that you let us know via the chat who you are and where you are joining us from. This helps us learn more about you, our audience, and helps us select future topics that may be of interest to you. Today we have a presentation from Becky Bradley, Executive Director of the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, on the evolving megaregion, revisioning freight development and mobility in eastern Pennsylvania. I have the honor of introducing Becky and the great work she is doing at the LVPC. Becky Bradley, AICP, has over 20 years of experience in city, regional, economic development, historic preservation, and transportation planning, including significant implementation experience in community revitalization, infrastructure investment, roadway redesign, and trail construction. She has been the Executive Director of the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission since August 2013 and is leading a $4.4 billion regional transportation planning program. Becky also manages development proposal reviews that in the last 5 years included more than 25,000 new housing units and nearly 40 million square feet of commercial industrial. There will be an opportunity for questions following the presentation, so please type your questions into the WebEx chat box and we'll address them during the Q&A portion towards the end. Lastly, before we introduce Becky directly, I want to let you know that we are going to have a break over the summer and we'll be starting up our Brown Bag series again on Thursday, September 26th at noon, when the New York City Department of City Planning will be presenting. More information on this will be forthcoming. With no further ado, I want to turn it over to Becky Bradley. Becky?
Thank you very much, Adam. This is a really exciting opportunity to be able to share some of the things that are happening here in the Lehigh Valley.
Becky, I'm not hearing you. I'm not sure if you can hear us.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Hear you now. Great. Thanks.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Adam, for having me here this afternoon. This is a really exciting opportunity for us to talk about the relationship between the NYMTC region and the Lehigh Valley and what's been happening here and how that affects you and vice versa. And so I think, Mara, if that's correct, I just share my PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right, and I just want to make sure that everybody can see the presentation.
Looks great. Thank you, Becky.
Okay, wonderful. So we're just going to talk about, or I'm just going to talk about how all of our recent freight development has caused us to revision our entire land use and development strategy. But first, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about our agency. We are a metropolitan planning organization, and that's our Lehigh Valley Transportation Study, but everybody just calls us the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. And that's important because we're also a 2-county planning commission under a series of Pennsylvania laws, state and or federal laws as well, including the Delaware River Basin Compact. So we review every subdivision and land development plan. We provide advisory guidance to our communities, some regulatory review like stormwater. We have regulatory authority over that. We review every zoning code, official map, subdivision land development ordinance our municipal governments do. And so we're able to kind of bridge that transportation land use connection. And that's really been beneficial as we've navigated some global change that has directly affected the region. So we are one of the fastest growing corridors in the nation for warehousing and logistics, but we've always been a manufacturing economy. Everybody knows about Bethlehem Steel, but prior to that, we had one of the first canal systems in the nation that helped bring everything from wood to coal down to major market in Philadelphia, but also over into New Jersey. Currently, our gross domestic product just out of Lehigh and Northampton counties, which is the Lehigh Valley by definition, here locally, even though our MSA extends into Carbon County north of us and over into Warren County, New Jersey. But our gross domestic product right now is over $5 billion. For a way of context, that is larger than the entire state of Alaska. It is also larger than the state of New Hampshire. So just the economic output of our 2-county region exceeds that of certain states. So you can see the value of that. And you can do similar comparisons for New York. I know you guys have. Yours actually competes with nations. And so you start adding the proximity of our regions together and how close we are. And you really start to see that there's an affinity between our regions, but the overall economic impact of what we're doing together is incredible. So because of this traditional manufacturing economy that we have, add in e-commerce, logistics, and warehousing, for better or worse, because it's a controversial topic here, and I'll explain a little bit why. We've had to rethink our land use and development strategy, which is a very balanced growth management strategy and always has been, and really sort of tailor our work to being a little bit more freight centric, not because we're like, yay, build wherever, but because we have to organize it, like shown in the aerial here out in western Lehigh County, which ties into Interstate 78 and then into other roads that support that, including Route 100 and State Route 222. So we've really had to develop a policy, regulatory, and investment strategy through then the MPO. So county planning handling the policy and regulatory to some extent, tailored in with the MPO, and then the investment strategy. But there's other investors as well, like the Lehigh County Authority, which does sewer and water investments and other things that support these more coordinated industrial districts like you see on the slide. So if we are going to have them, we want them to be more like this, where you have adequate infrastructure that can be managed and maintained and grown to reflect the growth in the community. But we're also seeing a lot of land uses all over the place. That's where I'll talk to you a little bit about how we have to manage that. But just to set the context, because we're a county planning agency, we're able to monitor all land developments. Remember, we see those plans. And in most cases, our advisor, but sometimes we're a regulatory partner if the local government defers that responsibility to us. I'll draw your attention to the navy blue, which is the industrial line. So you can see between, or the industrial portion of the chart. So you can see between 2015 and 2023, the amount of industrial growth that we've had compared to all other non-residential uses, whether it's public, quasi-public, so additions to schools, our higher education institutions, building new buildings. You see that office line. We have a little bit here and there, but we all know that market is a little soft. And you can see then recreation, retail, transportation facilities, general commercial, and agriculture. You can see we really do have less and less agriculture, but that's a whole nother conversation for another day. But you can see how much of the region's development proposals are targeted towards the industrial market over this period of time. In the bubbles on the right-hand side of the slide, you can see the total amount of industrial, of square footage overall in non-residential in 2023. So just last year, it was over 21.4 million square feet. Of that, 17.9 per million square feet was new industrial proposals. We still have some industrial proposals that are not in, or they're going through the development process, but they were proposed in prior years, so 2022, 2021. So sum total, you add all of that up, and we have a potential for an additional 45 million square feet, give or take, just up till the end of 2023, and then we've had some additional proposals the first quarter of this year and going into the second. So there is a high percentage of growth in just a very small land area. We obviously monitor what's going on from a private sector perspective very closely. And I would encourage anyone to do this. CBRE, Transwestern, there's others, but they provide good reports on what's happening, and you can tailor it down to your regions as well. So what this slide shows us, and again, this is from CBRE's 2024 first quarter report, it really shows us that rents have steadily increased. And they've gone from, as you can see, back in 2022, between $5.79 per square foot in Lehigh County, which is the green bar. The blue bar is Northampton County at $7.98 per square foot per year, up to over $11 each. So that's why we're starting to see, or have been seeing, so much growth in proposals and then in construction. So you can also see from this chart that demand for industrial facilities grew rapidly during and immediately after the pandemic, but it still remains high, and that demand drives that growth. So, which is why the region has seen so many industrial facilities proposed, built, and more in construction. It is of note, and we all know this, that money's more expensive because interest rates are higher, and they have stayed high. So high levels of demand and consumption and labor shortages have fueled inflation, but these factors have resulted in higher construction costs. But it's not necessarily affecting the demand here to the extent that you see in other markets. So really what that's telling us is there's a fundamental shift, specifically in warehousing and logistics, to be more of the retail of the 21st century and going forward than in prior decades. That's inherently related to manufacturing as well, and is, again, we have both. So those two things live together, though they are not necessarily exclusive or inclusive of one another. So there's a dynamic. Here's a great example. Keurig Dr. Pepper has a major manufacturing facility out in western Lehigh County. They have a couple of buildings. It was actually a redevelopment of a former Kraft Foods manufacturing plant. And they do everything from, actually, they call it blowing the bottles that they package their various drinks in. So their plastic bottles come in, and the plastic comes in pellets. They blow it out into a bottle, they fill it up, then it goes down a line, it gets packaged, and it gets shipped. So it gets stored for a minute. So you have everything from the manufacturing of the container to the manufacturing of the product to the filling of the product to the storage of the product, all across one site with two buildings. They move things back and forth with robots, which is pretty exciting stuff. So you do have the logistical aspects tied in with manufacturing aspects, but then you also have your Amazons and your other retailers that have e-commerce operations. And then you have, the people that transfer those goods, whether it's FedEx, UPS, that ties in with our airport and other things. So right now, our total inventory is over 116.5 million square feet in just our two counties. We have a vacancy rate of about 7%, which the market has told us is a healthy vacancy rate. Just in the last quarter, there was over 853,000 square feet that was completed. We've got at least 1.65 million in construction now, and there's been an absorption rate of 979,000 square feet. So you can see that the absorption is really critical to then the construction and those getting completed and occupied. So that really underscores the demand. And that's why it's so important to monitor what those industrial development and leasing companies are doing. So this is from Transwestern, and this is really a comparison of what's happened in the Lehigh Valley Central PA market as it relates to what they call other markets, but what they're also calling the New Jersey, it's really the New Jersey, New York market. What you can really see here is between the Lehigh Valley, so that Lehigh Northampton area that I represent, going out towards Harrisburg along the Interstate I-78 corridor, the private sector has really said, hey, you have a market here, an inland freight market. our total inventory for that whole kind of eastern PAI 78 corridor is 706 million square feet right now. You can see it's had a 3.9% growth in the last 1 year. They're expecting growth to slow a little to 1.9%. You're seeing a healthy absorption rate at 2.6%, and then a serious growth in rent of 12.9% year over year. Note that the New Jersey, New York total inventory is 787 million square feet. So really the Lehigh Valley Central PA area, when you add it up, is near equivalent to the New Jersey, New York market. So then you add all of those together and you really see how we compare. We become larger than Chicago. We become, closer to what you see in Southern California, which is the largest freight market in the US. You see that the Dallas-Fort Worth folks there, we're creeping up on them as well. And you see places like Houston, which has been similar to us in growth over the last 5 to 10 years. You really see that market and that inventory, and our area here in the Lehigh Valley Central PA area is being roughly equivalent. But just kind of a note, we're larger right now than Baltimore, Washington, and we're really close to Atlanta. We're larger than the South Florida, Miami area, and larger than Seattle. Another note that I want to make here is a lot of those places have a water port. We do not. And so looking at the movement of freight between regions, the affinity between regions makes a lot of sense between Lehigh Valley, Central PA, and New Jersey, New York. And I'm going to tell you about a cool partnership that we've had for years. So this just kind of summarizes that trans-Western map that I showed you, and really shows us that right now that it's the 8th largest industrial market in the US. Little old Allentown, right? Little old Harrisburg. So that's forced us to think differently about who we are and what we do. So over the last 5 years or so, we've got a lot of work to develop specialized tools for our planning partners, so our local governments and other folks. We worked with Northampton County on a freight-based land use guide. It was the first time we compiled everybody's zoning and looked at it through the lens of where do they allow all forms of industrial, how do they have it regulated, and giving our local governments advice on how to manage that better. One of the things that we found was a lot of people had honestly outdated zoning. So they would just have general industrial, all industrial here, and it wouldn't actually be targeted to the infrastructure itself. And so then we started working with communities to make that change in Northampton County. I'm going to tell you about what we're doing with Lehigh County on behalf of the region in a little bit. We also started to see some new land uses like high cube and automated warehouses, so towers of goods. We started to see actual building proposals go from about 40 feet up to 60 feet. So, a 4-story building roughly to 6-story building on average, and even ones as tall as 12 stories coming in. So we needed to spin around some guidance for our local governments so they could prepare for that. And as I mentioned earlier, we have to think outside the box. We weren't talking about these things in the Lehigh Valley, 20 years ago in the way that we need to now. So I want to say about 7 years ago now, we joined with the MAP Forum, which NYMTC is a very important leader in, along with the North Jersey Transportation Planning Authority, a whole host of councils of governments, metropolitan planning organizations in Connecticut, and then Orange County Transportation Council in New York. That has really helped us look at everything from climate resilience and the supply chain. It was very important for us as we went through the pandemic, when we've gone through road closures related to snow, and how do we keep emergency supplies going up to things like everyday things like truck parking. And so that's been a very beneficial mega regional partnership for us, and is really, I think what led us to part of this conversation today is that we're really seeing a growth from that New York Metro over to the Lehigh Valley, and even beyond, where that ties in with the second partnership, the Eastern Pennsylvania Freight Alliance. It's a group of metropolitan planning organizations, 4 counties in Northeast PA. So that's the Poconos area, the Lackawanna Luzerne MPO, which is Wilkes-Barre Scranton. Lebanon County is a key partner because it's a connection between I-78 and I-80, or I-81, which ties over to I-80, which we call the Eastern PAC. And then our friends over in the Reading area at the Berks County Planning Commission, and their MPO is called the Reading Area Transportation Study. So we really looked at the infrastructure where we started to see growth and where that mega region was starting to grow. And so we organized ourselves into this Eastern PA Freight Alliance. We're in the process right now of developing a mega regional freight infrastructure plan. I know Steve Shermonti's on today from WSP. Cambridge Systematics is also helping us with that. And I think it's all important to note because they've also worked with NYMTC on your freight planning. And so we have some coordination and collaboration across those individual MPO efforts that tie back to the mega region. We've started now focusing on even more specialized tools and developing new initiatives. We have some region-wide ones. In 2019, we adopted a first ever combined by-county comprehensive plan. So we tie our workforce, our economic strategy, our housing, our environmental, parks, rec, and open space strategy, our public facilities strategy, with our transportation strategy now. We just updated that long-range transportation plan last year. Most of the policies stayed similar with some tweaks on alternative transportation, electric vehicle, and alternative fuel charging, and some carbon reduction items. We're revising our freight land use guidance from that Northampton County effort. We're going to do something really interesting where we're going to take the zoning from Lehigh County, just like we did with Northampton County, and look at their individual codes for all those local governments there. But we're going to tie it to our transportation safety planning, as well as where our workforce needs to get to, so we can also tie it to our transit strategy. We've developed policy, and it's adopted, that we have these land uses of regional significance. So basically it's any freight development, and we've been coordinating across agencies. So anytime we get a large land development, it could be large housing development, but by and large, in this case, for this presentation today, just focus on the industrial components of it. We bring together the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. If we need to bring in the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental, the DEP, or the Conservation of Natural Resources, the county conservation districts, could be the Delaware River Joint Toll Bridge Commission in certain cases, but we bring everybody together when a land development comes into our office to see what are their regulatory requirements, how are we going to coordinate those if we need to. We bring in the local government as well, sometimes the actual applicant if we need more information, so we can make sure that we're bringing that umbrella and bringing everything together. So when that large land development proposal goes to our Lehigh Valley Planning Commission committee and full commission for action on the proposal, that we have as much information and as much coordination together as possible. So we aren't, for example, saying that, oh, PennDOT has issued the highway occupancy permit on this, so it might not make sense for us to propose additional improvements, when in fact they haven't issued the highway occupancy permit and they're still seeking information from the applicant on X, Y, or Z. So it provides not only efficiency for us in understanding what's in front of us and coordination with other regulatory bodies, but it also allows us to get those applicants to an answer faster. And that's just something that we're doing under county planning, but it's been beneficial in really understanding each agency's regulatory needs, expectations, and then ultimately leading to better projects. And I'm going to show you what that means in a minute. We've targeted sub-regional efforts and writing multi-municipal comprehensive plans. In Pennsylvania, every local government has to have a comprehensive plan, a strategy for its community over the next 10 to 20 years. However, they can join forces and create a multi-municipal comprehensive plan. What that allows them to do, and it's the only way they can do this, is under Pennsylvania law, is then they can combine zoning efforts. Doesn't mean they have to create a single zoning hearing board or a single set of zoning regulations, but it means they can coordinate the different codes across the communities. So we have now 36 out of our 62 municipalities in some form of multi-municipal planning effort. And now we're working with a number of them to actually update their zoning codes. We've put together what we call the Lehigh Valley General Assembly, which is all the local regulatory bodies and areas and spheres of influence in the government sector. We meet twice a year. We talk about changes in land use. So it's all the local governments, our 16 school districts, our 17 sewer and water authorities, our state and federal elected officials, and our county elected officials, and then other agencies as needed. And then we've been targeting specific local technical assistance and training to our local governments to address the real challenges that have come out of this very rapid and evolving change in land uses. So you can't go anywhere without talking about truck parking. So one of the things that we do is part of the land use of regional significance meetings that we have with the other agencies. And then what the LVPC does is part of its bi-county planning responsibilities is we write in every land use letter about truck parking, how it needs to be on site, explaining hours of operations and the challenges for our truck drivers. We talk about them, and this is important, as our truck drivers, because they actually bring us the goods that we order online. They get our food to our grocery stores and our medical supplies that we need, life-saving medical supplies to our health institutions. And so we talk about their needs and the global infrastructure and the system that supports daily life. And that's an important way to talk with the community about massive change. So we do push hard for truck parking to be on site. We push hard for drivers' lounges and resting facilities. We even push hard for restrooms and shower facilities, vending machines, other things that not only do the workers potentially inside the facility need, but the truck drivers need as well. The other thing we do is we have a partnership with our transit agency, Lanta. We're a bus-only system right now, but as part of that, if it's going to be a workforce destination, Lanta provides comments to our letters that have really been supporting the deployment of more and more and more bus stops, bus shelters, and Lanta now does a fee-for-service agreements. So if it's going to be a major employer, they work directly with that employer, and we flag it as part of the land development review process for them then to follow up to basically get people to their shifts on time from our 3 major transit centers in the city of Allentown, city of Bethlehem, and city of Easton. We push for things like snow scraper tools. That's what the yellow snow scraper is in the bottom middle image, and signage that directs people to where they need to go. We know that this really only addresses the issues in development now, and there's existing issues. So we're still working through what we need to do about truck parking, and I'll show you some of that. It is one of our biggest concerns, as it is almost everywhere. We've been working with local governments to amend their regulations to allow truck parking, even overnight parking. We've been rethinking what we're going to do in terms of some of our park and ride lots, which have substantially changed. Commuter patterns have changed everywhere after the pandemic, but there are opportunities there. Even working with gas stations to find ways to provide at least some temporary facilities, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and others. And that's actually been starting to pay off. one of the things that we do for really anyone, but it's targeted towards our local governments, is we'll run calculations for them using the ITE trip generation manual. This is important because most new industrial is built on spec. And so as a result of that, you really don't necessarily know who the end user is, but the traffic impact statement that's submitted to you says it's X, Y, Z use. So one of the things that Brian Height, our transportation planning lead for freight, does along with Evan Gardy and Ben Dinkle now in our office is look at how different land use categories can affect trip generation and communicate that clearly to our local governments. We've changed how we operate as an MPO. It's even translated down to our limited English proficiency plan and our public participation plan, because with the growth of all this industry, we've had a significant growth in population. Our jobs are actually growing faster than our population, but our population's been growing at a steady clip, about 4,000 to 6,000 persons per year, give or take, for the last 60 years. And our community has become more diverse, more global, more reflective of other parts of the US and adjacent metros like North Jersey. So as a result of that, we have to think about how we're able to communicate to people more effectively and why that's so important. So I know there's Justice 40 requirements where certain funding allocations to our metropolitan planning organization, at least 40%, need to go to support equity and environmental justice communities. When we just updated the long range transportation plan last year, we said, you know what, let's look at that across all of our funding categories, regardless if it was one of those that's been flagged by Federal Highway Administration for Justice 40 requirements. That is helping us make sure that we're not inadvertently creating equity issues in other locations in the system and then tying that back to the needs of the freight community, but the needs of the community overall. A lot of our truck drivers, a lot of people working in our industrial facilities have limited English proficiency. So it's not just where they live, it's also where they work. And so that's another justification for that. So we just updated these documents to help us reach folks, continue to understand their issues better, invest in those parts of the system that support everyone. And so that's an important philosophical change that's occurred as a result of a lot of things, population growth being one of them, diversification of our population being another, but also then the industries that are a huge part of our economy, in particular, the industrial sector. We've also been more hyper-focused on walking, biking, and ADA accessibility, because a lot of people working in the industrial sector, they don't necessarily have a car. Uber rides are too expensive. The transit system may not necessarily run to those locations at the time that they need it. And so we really do have a strong focus, not just on vehicles and larger scale vehicles and passenger vehicles, but also on all other users of the system and how we connect those places where people live to where they work. And so we've done some really interesting things, even partnering with AARP Pennsylvania. Why? Because they have a huge ready volunteer force that will help you, along with the United Way here in the Lehigh Valley, which runs our age-friendly communities initiative in both counties. And we did a huge series of walk audits. So what we did is we took all of our serious injury and fatality locations for bikes, pedestrians, but also vehicles, and said, we need more information on these locations. So we used the AARP walk audit form, which is excellent, by the way. And we went out and we inventoried all of those utilizing trained volunteers. We trained everybody up. And that has actually helped us to start to rethink and retool our transportation safety plan, which is underway currently. And so I encourage you guys to think outside of the box with your own efforts and bring together those partnerships that may not necessarily seem related, but they have a core component to the holistic operation of the system and how to get information, data, and then rethink and retool what you need to do to be successful. I'd mentioned those multi-municipal efforts. This shows the groups of them, all 6 of them, over 30 or 36 communities right now. But our River Central community, which is across 2 counties, 6 communities there, they're now embarking on creating that coordinated zoning. The part of the plan, Southwest Lehigh folks just wrapped up their coordination of zoning and created an official map. The Northern Lehigh folks are creating coordinated zoning and official maps now. And then the Plan Slate Belt community is wrapping up its multi-municipal comprehensive plan. And then they've already started, even though they're just going into the adoption process of the plan, they've already started organizing around doing a 9 community coordinated zoning and official map effort. And then our friends up in the Nazareth area, 3 communities just coordinated their zoning. And so all of these individual efforts are at least 5 years. And so you can see from the time that development is proposed, it gets built, the amount of effort and requirements it takes to change your thinking from a planning and regulatory process in Pennsylvania is slow. It's deliberate. It's collaborative. We are a state of consensus. It's part of the Commonwealth system, and it takes a lot of time to do that. And so while we've seen a lot of growth and development, now we're starting to see our communities to respond to that in a more of a smart growth way. And that isn't just necessarily reaction to things that they didn't like that happened, though some of it is. It's also thinking ahead of, wow, we really have changed. What do we want to grow into? How does that relate to all of these aspects of community? And by the way, we are major partners in every one of these efforts. In fact, we actually were staff for the River Central Plan, the Nazareth Area Plan, NAS Plan, the Plan Southwest Lehigh Area Plan, Plan Slate Belt, and the Northern Lehigh Plan. And then we were attendees and partners with the Lower Saucon, Saucon Valley Borough of Hellertown Plan. So we as an agency have become professional staff to keeping these communities together and helping them go where they need to go to manage these freight land use issues. We even listed the state as well. Our governor Shapiro right now is fantastic at coordinating a lot of statewide efforts. But he also has been great at supporting our region through staff support to do some pretty innovative things. And just to show you one, the Office of Transportation and Opportunity presented to that General Assembly just last month. We talked a lot about the new economic development plan for Pennsylvania, and this just kind of summarizes it here. But it really is about how do we invest for economic growth, but in a way that's innovative and still respects the vibrancy and resiliency of regions, which is interesting to have the state put forth a plan that it's about regions, not necessarily about individual governments or individual counties, that the state itself is thinking about organization of space from a higher level and how it can make sure that there's coordination across groups of individual regulatory and government boundaries or municipal boundaries. So there's a strong focus on equity and a strong focus on improving the speed of the permitting process at the state level. So they identified top priorities. Notice manufacturing is the fourth one down, along with life sciences, energy, agriculture, robotics, and technology, which you can argue, especially in the Lehigh Valley, are all interrelated. So really that helps our region as we look forward to those freight land use connections. We work again closely with our local governments. We put out a survey in December, closed it up in January, and heard specifically from them what their challenges are. You will notice that number 5 is aging infrastructure. How do we manage and maintain that at the same time that we're getting all this growth, especially more wear and tear on our infrastructure system? You see number 4 is the changing expectations of government from the community, and how do you respond to that? And then number 3 is the misconceptions that come with it. So all of this, the funding is number 2. And then how do we manage this if we don't know what our costs are? You can see that 1 through 5 of the top 5 priorities are all related to growth. And again, a significant amount of that has been industrial. When we ask them what their greatest land use challenges are, they're telling us, "Oh, our land use codes are not keeping up. We need help." They're also telling us that, wow, look at how our traffic patterns have changed. And specific freight, industrial, and warehouse impacts came up at number 3. So you can see that the public sentiment and the way that our governments are thinking about responding to that is really prioritized around the issues of industrial. So we ask them, what kind of training do you need to help you through these issues? And I think it's important to have that two-way dialogue and understand what they need. And they said, we need core training on how do we manage land use? How do we continue to manage zoning? And so what are really our responsibilities? And so we focus then our efforts throughout this year and then going forward on how do we give them the support they need. We've partnered with the Pennsylvania Municipal Planning Education Institute. We do Planning 101, which is community planning. I actually teach that. I'm a certified instructor in that. And I think that's important to have the leadership of your organizations out there with our communities, being able to support them, having other people in our organization as well, but also bringing in outside instructors. So they always say, you know, it's an expert if it's from 50 miles away. But the truth is we need experts all over the place to manage the challenges that are in front of us. We really have our what we call planning commission training on subdivision land development, and we trained our zoning administrators just this last month. And then we're going to be doing some general zoning classes in 2025. And then we do on-sites all the time, quick little things if we have a lot of changes in the elected leadership or appointed leadership of our governments. Now, every state gets funding for local technical assistance through US DOT. PennDOT has this amazing program that they support us in and that we do as partners, where we not only do like online training and in-person training on how to fully reclaim road beds and what they call full depth reclamation, to when do you put in stop signs, how do you do that, to freight management, to stormwater management and other things. But we call it our Dr. Brian program. I've got Brian's contact up there because he's our freight expert, but he manages this program. And we actually do on-calls all the time. We're going out to do one on Friday where we're starting to see changes in freight movement or traffic patterns. And then that's leading to some cause and effect issues that we have to sort out. It helps our local governments prioritize where to invest, how to invest, and we bring a planner. And PennDOT comes out with an engineer, and they actually get a mini report, which then a lot of them use to successfully go after competitive funding at the state and federal level, or to approach us when we open up our long-range transportation plan every 4 years for consideration in the project mix. We do require that projects be in our long-range transportation plan in order to make it to our transportation improvement program for short-term funding and implementation. But it also being in our long-range plan, we do a whole list of what we call unmet needs. Out of a lot of these local technical assistance program visits, we can get communities into the unmet needs list at a minimum, if not into the funding cycle as a regional priority. And it also helps us know things that we wouldn't know in any other case. And so that two-way dialogue is critically important to the management of the transportation system, but also then to land use, capital planning at the local level and other things. We communicate out monthly and quarterly what's actually happening, what proposals have we seen, what change are we seeing, so that measuring and monitoring and the constant communication of that becomes important. And I'm going to end on this. We're also doing some things that I find incredibly exciting. But we've started to really rethink our transportation infrastructure system and its utility beyond mobility. And that's important, utility beyond mobility. So we got this opportunity, just like the New York region did, through the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency for carbon pollution reduction. We all had to develop that received this funding. I think it was the top 75 regions in terms of population in the US received this funding by formula. It came out of the Inflation Reduction Act to create priority climate action plans. Now we're all working on region-wide climate action plans, but they asked us for a specific priority. That work had to be done by March 1 of this year all across the country for those grantees. We chose transportation decarbonization is our priority. It's obvious why, with all the growth in population, but specifically the growth in our industrial sector. We said, hey, you know what? Where can we get the greatest improvement in air quality? How can we actually manage stormwater runoff better? We have some really fragile subsurface geology here that creates sinkholes and other things that cost us tons of money. And the more frequent and heavy rainfalls that we get, the change in freeze thaw cycles and other things, the more and more issues we're having with the infrastructure system. That costs us more as a metropolitan planning organization in addressing landslides in our steep slope areas. We have part of State Route 611 closed right now, which is a designated scenic byway. We had a sinkhole right in this interchange, near this interchange area recently. But it's not a good situation. So how can we utilize our existing infrastructure for mobility in a different way and increase its utility? So we started looking at where we could rethink basic things like interchanges, areas where we have a lot of green plants. Sometimes it's grass, sometimes it's invasive species, sometimes it was actually intentionally planted. And so we looked at those areas and where we had a high concentration of those, but also where we saw the greatest congestion, where we saw, that means more tailpipe emissions, right? And where we saw the highest safety incidents. That, interestingly enough, was not on Interstate 78, but it was on State Route 33, which is the north-south corridor in this image, and then US Route 22, which goes over into Phillipsburg, New Jersey, which is the horizontal line on this map. And we marked, and also 378, which goes into Bethlehem and is a key equity priority for us in the region. And we looked at where we could make the biggest difference. So I'm just going to show you two examples. Here's one. This is State Route 33 at 22. By the way, Route 22 and Route 33 take more vehicles every day than our interstate highway. Yet they are not interstate designated. So we have some challenges with funding related to that and the way that funding formulas work federally, but also then how Pennsylvania translates that. And so again, being more efficient with this system becomes important. Notice this giant cloverleaf interchange. It's about 99 acres, give or take. A lot of area. You can even see the mowing lines there. There's a couple of scrubby looking Halloween trees there. It really is kind of unmaintained to some extent, though it is mowed. If we plant that up with microforests, natives, plantings, get out, the invasive species. We can actually create pollination corridors that support our agricultural economy. We can make our region look nicer. We can manage our stormwater better. There's a lot of cool things we can do. I also believe that people act better in places that look nicer. So we could potentially see a decrease in aggressive driving behavior and other things. So if we're able to move forward with this project, either using some EPA resources, which we applied for, or a combination with some carbon reduction funds that we've received by formula out of the bipartisan infrastructure law, we can start to make a difference, and we'll measure and monitor what happens in those locations. But it'll just look nicer, and that's really what this shows. And it'll be better for our air quality. And we even quantified what that would mean. So you could reduce carbon emissions in just that interchange I showed you by 550 tons a year. And by 2050, that's over 13,000 tons of CO2. And we showed, how you could do that overall. And I want to show you one thing that ties specifically to freight, but also to other multimodal activities. We have this beautiful old school park and ride lot at Route 33, just south of that big interchange that I showed you. Very close and in between 22 and 78. As you all know, commuting patterns have changed either into New Jersey or into New York or other places. This park and ride lot used to be full. It's what it looks like now. Not so much, right? We also have Transbridge, which is a private bus line. That's a major commuter bus for us in the region, picking up and dropping off in that highway ramp, which is incredibly dangerous. Our public transit agency also picks up and drops off inside the park and ride lot. Note that where it says William Penn Highway Park and Ride Lot, which is its name, it's two kind of lots there is no one parked. That's a potential truck parking opportunity and a green truck parking opportunity, as well as a multimodal transit opportunity and an opportunity for us to green things up, provide alternative fuel charging facilities, get it better organized. So just rethinking an existing facility already in public ownership, just like the clover leaves and the highway rights of way, we can re-leverage and revision our future. And just doing that area, which includes the rights of way along the roadway, but also the park and ride lot, could really do everything from help buffer, it could help reduce noise pollution issues, to reduce the amount of staffing needed to maintain that, and so on and so forth. And here's a picture of what it could look like. And you can see that we could replant 27 acres, we could reduce impervious surface and do all kinds of really cool things. So the takeaways here are industrial is big, freight related to it is big, it's all complicated, and it's evolving really fast. So that equals massive change. We got to approach the issues from every possible angle. Everything is interrelated, and we just need to own that fact. We have to track what's happening. We always have to listen so we can be aware of those changes, and we need to communicate that. The communication loop is critical because if people don't understand what's happening, it gets frustrating, and that can lead to negative things instead of the culture of collaboration that we're all trying to support. We have to allow our work programs to evolve. The more you know, the better you get, right? And so we really need to be humble in the approach to our work. And in order to do that, we have to build, maintain, and grow our partnerships and collaborations wherever we can get them. So it's a cross-sector issue, and it's a cross-sector series of solutions. There isn't just one. Big problems require a lot of innovation. They require a lot of collaboration. They require multiple means to the end. So it's really easy to quit, right? It's always easy to quit. It's harder to make a difference. And I want to end on this. we got to respect ourselves. We got to respect the challenges in front of us. But we also need to respect whomever we work for, public sector, private sector, the community overall. And we have to invest in our future. The only way to do that is out of respect for ourselves and the people we represent. So, does anybody have any questions? Thank you.
That was really great. Thank you, Becky.
So
Stephanie,
far,
do we
nothing
have
in the
any?
chat. Nothing in the chat yet, but I will keep a lookout for any questions we might have in the chat.
Well, I'll get us started then, if that's all right, Becky. So I was curious because you're dealing with so many different factors. You know, you're talking about all that industrial development, but you've also got the residential community, and I'm kind of wondering, you know, how you balance those, or how the community is balancing those, because obviously everybody wants the development, but there are questions about the kind of development because it's so industrial and there's so many additional trucks. You know, where is that balance, and how has that been in terms of working with all of those partners to try and achieve that balance?
It's really very easy to work with industry. It's very easy to work with our state and federal partners, our county partners, most of our local governments, a lot of the community overall. What we've really had to be watchful of and then mindful of is we've seen some entire boards of township supervisors overturn over development, that it was just too much growth, and we've seen change there, and that can get contentious, and it's almost always around a development related issue. So getting in there and working with those partners when they're willing to work with us, to get them whatever training they need, to talk them through the change, to let them know that we're supporting them, has been important. I think the other thing that's been a real challenge for us too is, and it's a challenge for everyone at this point, but there's been some very contentious Facebook groups, no growth groups pop up, which you would expect when you see the kind of growth that you have in a region like ours. And so we've been very active in just getting them quality information, just like we'll give quality information to anyone, to try to take the hook out of it. And so we're willing to try any strategy that brings logic to the conversation. And be brave about it. But everyone deserves quality, consistent, timely, accurate information. And so we really strive to do that. And that's where we try to then bring the balance in, because you should get the same message today from me that you're getting from me all the time, right? So we kind of have a package of those things, and then whatever the situation is, we navigate it to get that same information out to everyone, and that's how we achieve the balance to the best extent that we can. It isn't easy. We're a small staff. Soup to nuts, we're like 25 people doing all of this work, and you just heard about the freight part. So we're trying to grow a little bit where we can. But at the end of the day, that's where those partnerships and collaborations become important as well to the conversation on balance.
Really great. Thank you. Stephanie, any questions yet? I'll keep monopolizing if we don't have any yet.
Nothing yet, so go for it,
Okay.
Adam.
All right, I'm going to go for it then. So then I was curious what your relationship is with the enforcement community, because I would imagine that there are those concerns about, you know, you talked about the regulations with truck parking, trying to keep everybody on site, but also try to take care of them, of course. But for those that maybe don't, you know, park where they're supposed to park, or, you know, don't really know the community because you have such a turnover of drivers, you know, how does that work in terms of working with the enforcement community? Do you guys do that, or do you not really get involved?
Yeah, no, we definitely do. In fact, they're a huge partner for us. It's actually like the police departments, whether it's state police or local police where they exist. A lot of our communities just use state police for their local police force, but not exclusively. They're the ones telling us, like, where can we direct these drivers? We get it. They're hardworking folks. They need to get where they go, but they're out of regulations. And so I think that's been that, like, understanding that we're all working and that work is important is a sort of fundamental culture in the Lehigh Valley. So it's I think, been easier for us in some ways, because the cops are coming to us. They were part of our truck parking roundtable in 2020 and other things, saying, "Help us out," or "Hey, what if we talked about that 33 park and ride lot?" That was actually the state police's recommendation to us and to PennDOT to work towards that. And then you saw we're looking at a green infrastructure approach to that. And so we just have to keep them, keep folks at the table. We do have a freight working group. We call it Workshop Freight, because we don't believe in steering committees anymore. They're exclusionary. So we do have people who are like, hey, you got to come to this, but any member of the public can come as well. And that, again, keeps that transparency up. But police are key to that. Does it work 100% of the time? No. But the interesting thing is, on the enforcement side, they're coming to us and saying, hey, we want to be part of the solution. So we know that we're being successful when they want to collaborate.
Really great. I have one more question if we have time, I hope. Which is, I wrote down your comment there, people act better in places that look nicer, because I completely agree with that. So I was curious, given the very tight deadlines for that, EPA submission, were some of those ideas kind of kicking around earlier in terms of the pollinator, in terms of developing, those, the interchange, or did you develop those fresh for this application?
We developed it fresh.
Wow.
And again, it came out of those workshops. We had one on the environment to be like kind of our leadership group, Congress of the Willing really is what they are. And it came out of that. Like, we all just kind of had a light bulb moment. And I said, okay, PennDOT wasn't at that meeting. And I said, well, I'll approach them and see what they think. And I didn't know what they were going to do. And they were like, oh my gosh, we could do LED lighting upgrades. We are short on people to mow. And they got really excited about it. And so we just like ran with it. And I mean, you understand the deadline. It was like 30 days from the end of our priority climate action plan getting done. And I think that light bulb kicked on about 8 weeks out from that deadline, when we actually had something written in draft form for the priority climate action plan, or the PCAP. And we just put it together. And sometimes that's the way these things go. Other times it's taken us 10, 20 years to get something organized. So I think we just got lucky. Again, it's the Congress of the Willing.
Yeah, sure is. I think we have another question for you.
I have a question.
We have one question in the chat. How are you able to encourage public participation in your freight-related activities?
Again, it's that idea of the workshop, no steering committees, right? Like, those don't help us. Sure, we can do focus groups and invite specific people to the table, but at the end of the day, we need to be close to the community and what they need. So we basically call them workshops for a reason, and anyone can come. It's the build a bigger table philosophy. Pull up the chair and you're welcome. Have a cup of coffee, glass of water, eat a cookie. We always feed people too. I think that's very important to do, because people are more likely to collaborate if they're sharing something together. And so we try to make sure that whether it's little snacks or, we're putting out some pizzas or something, that people feel welcome. That also, we moved our office, to be honest with you. We just moved about a little over a month ago now into an equity community that has transit access, has nearby highway access, and also has a arterial road system access and trail access, because some people use our trail system to commute. That was important for us to move into an area that we're trying to really be more mindful of serving in a better way, and that people can get to us more efficiently, and that we're providing those opportunities for everyone. We're going out to community events more and more and more, and we're just getting out there and saying, hey, be part of this too. Your voice is it's a democracy, right? That's a fundamental of America, right? It's our entire shtick. It shouldn't be a shtick though, right? We have to live it. So we needed it to be real, and we took the shtick out when we relocated. And so that's been key for us too. And we're hoping again that's a better public participation strategy, better limited English proficiency strategy, better strategy for just global involvement of the community. And we're centrally located in the middle of the valley now too. So we've been doing a lot of things that have been strategic in trying to get people to the table.
Really
We
great.
go to people too. Industry, meet with industry a lot as well.
That is the last chat question so
Oh,
far.
wait.
Oh, there's one more. Why did you allow all these warehouses to come in without first putting in the proper infrastructure? It is, we're scared. We are very frustrated and scared by driving amongst all this tractor trailer traffic and the dangerous situations.
We do not have regulatory authority over approval of any land development unless a local government defers that responsibility to us. And only 3 communities have, and they're very, very small. So again, it gets back to having these multi-municipal comprehensive planning efforts, which allow us, it's the only way under state law, Pennsylvania state law, for us to work with local governments to say, hey, this needs to be consistent with the infrastructure, whether it's sewer, whether it's water, whether it's transportation infrastructure, road, bridge, air, rail, all of those things, walking, biking infrastructure. And so when we work in those multi-municipal settings and create those multi-municipal plans, it's then the only way for those groups of communities to say, okay, like in the case of Northern Lehigh, Weisenberg Township has a very big industrial district, but Low Hill Township does not, neither does Lynn or Heidelberg or Washington Township or Slatington Borough. So it's the only way, once they have that multi-municipal comp plan adopted, which they have, to then work on coordinated zoning to say, okay, we're going to trade industrial uses. So Weisenberg already has industrial, that's where it should live. And then we can, Low Hill and others can trade for other uses that they have in their communities that maybe Weisenberg doesn't. And so again, it's a slow process, but the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission is not responsible for approval of warehouses. That is not our role under Pennsylvania law. But again, as a convener collaborator, we're going to tackle those big nasty problems and support our communities to make sure that they can respond and have the proper planning and regulatory environment through their zoning and official maps and even subdivision and land development ordinances to respond better than they have in the past.
Some follow-up comments, asking why not help the local government sooner to strengthen their zoning ordinances. And that's just one question. And then reviewing industrial site plans, do you have those guidelines published anywhere?
Okay, so why not sooner? We've been knocking on the door of our local governments for 60 years. But again, it's a Congress of the willing. So if a lot of our communities for a very long time was like, yeah, that's happening down there, that's not going to come up to us or over to us. And we've been knocking and putting out series after series of technical reports and having conversations through various ways and said, no, really, you've got to keep this stuff up to date. And so oftentimes it takes a development or developments that a community doesn't like to recognize that their regulations don't work for the current situation that they face. But if someone has filed a land development proposal in Pennsylvania, you cannot change the zoning on that proposal. So you have to go with whatever zoning has been adopted in that community at the time. And, you know, we've consistently now for over 20 years done those zoning administration, subdivision land development courses. We actually go to those local governments. Every January we ask, what are your changes? Who's changed on your planning commission? Who's changed in your staff? Who's changed on your zoning hearing board? How have your elected officials changed? And we utilize that information then to target and invite those persons to training around whatever subject area they're responsible for. I can't drag a person to those trainings. We do go to them as well, but there's a lot of things that we worked on over time. We're just a lot more active now because we're beholden to the wishes of both of our counties on the land development side. And so we have to have our counties fund us to be able to go out and do these more targeted interventions, which, by the way, Lehigh County has, but Northampton County has not.
Okay, we have one question. In New Jersey, many municipalities intentionally zoned for industrial in order to keep out housing due to the fear of growing school-age population growing and driving up property taxes. Many of these communities are now crying foul about the growth of warehousing and truck traffic in their communities. Just a comment really about unforeseeable, sometimes not, consequences.
We have a little of that here, but I'll be honest with you, housing development is just as controversial now as industrial development here because they're really competing for the same land at this point because the growth has been so pointed in a number of locations in the Lehigh Valley. Any place that's in our like developed area that we have that has some measure of infrastructure that can support growth, we have seen competition between those land uses in a big way. One community in the Saucon Valley actually had a very nice mixed-use residential proposal. The residents came out, said they didn't want it. And so now it's going to be an industrial development. And that community came out by and large cheering for it. So, you know, in another place, we have the opposite thing happening. So I think you're seeing these are just common planning conversations. And so you have to navigate through those, whatever your situation may be. And it's always about logic, right? Data beats BS. Always start with fact-based optimism and talk through and that's why our work is so important and continued, you know, funding by our counties for it is so important. Is because we have to be with our communities all the time, not just when you see a massive change or where it becomes a trend. We need to be out there with them all the time, supporting them on a regular basis in navigating the challenges that exist already and how that relates into what we can predict is going to come in the near term.
Thank you so much. No more chat questions at the moment.
All right, I think we're going to wrap up then. I'm going to thank you, Becky. You gave me another phrase. I just jotted down fact-based optimism. I'm going to hold on to that one. Appreciate that. Appreciate everything that you've shared. I see some folks from LVPC also joined us here to listen in. So really grateful that they were able to attend, and so many other folks too, and the great questions. So thank you, everyone. And we wish you a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.
Oh.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.